There's a guy from Nestle that doesn't think water is a human right. I mean, that guy should be hunted down and shot. Yeah. Right? And they're gonna sit and just talk about, talking about all the, I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, we gotta get America back to work.
It's like, dude, this guy wants to own the rain. Can we do something about this guy?
I was inspired by my recent video on the water crisis to create something about Nestle's many destructive acts towards the impoverished population. Throughout this video, I'm going to throw up an image of all the Nestle-owned brands, so if you decide to boycott the company after watching this video, you'll know exactly what products to stop buying. 1977 set the stage for Nestle's valid reputation of exploiting the poor. On July 4th, a nationwide boycott against the company broke out in the United States in response to the company's aggressive marketing of breast milk substitutes in developing countries. Groups like Save the Children and International Baby Food Action Network allege that these substitutes cause undue harm to the infants when used instead of breast milk. UNICEF has said that exclusively breastfed children are 14 times more likely to survive than non-breastfed children, and liken breastfeeding to a magic bullet for a child's survival. In order from least to most important, the dangers of baby formula are: according to UNICEF, the most critical time for the infant's development is the first 1,000 days from the start of the mother's pregnancy to the child's second birthday. To reiterate, babies that don't get the essential nutrients in this small window of time can potentially spend the rest of their life with detrimental effects. Infants need specific nutrients and antibodies that are only passed down while specific hormones are being released in the mother's body during breastfeeding. Due to the impoverished state of living, many mothers will use less than the recommended amount of formula in order to have it last longer. Less formula used equals less nutrition for the baby. This by itself isn't Nestle's problem, but when it's combined with the next two factors, that's when the real damage that's rolling in. A mother's lactation will slow down when she stops breastfeeding. Her body will realize that there's no breastfeeding going on, should be forced to resort to using baby formula. IBAFM accused Nestle of promoting formula over breast milk in developing countries while giving free samples of said breast milk to hospitals and maternity wards. Which sounds like a nice thing to do on the surface. After all, who doesn't like free stuff? But go a layer deeper. The formula is only free as long as the mother is in the maternity ward. When she leaves, her body's already slowed down lactation from using a formula over breastfeeding. So now she's forced to exclusively use a formula, which leads to baby formula has to be fixed with water. Unfortunately, most underdeveloped countries don't have access to the same water sanitation we do. Giving infants polluted water is bad enough, but that coupled with the fact that the baby bottle itself is often unsanitary really gives the baby the old 1-2 to the face. I want you to pay special attention to this next part right here because it's especially spicy. The statistics vary by community, but most mothers in developing countries are illiterate. The small amount that are literate can only read their native language. Which makes sense. After all, how many people in the UK and US of A, with all the access to education, know how to read multiple languages proficiently? But despite this, Nestle chose to put the sanitation instructions on their products in the wrong language. Now, I'm not saying this is done on purpose. I wasn't in those corporate meetings, and I wasn't even born when the scandal broke out. So I'll let you decide for yourself which possibility you think is more likely. Did Nestle make an oopsie when they forgot that people in different countries speak different languages? Or did the faceless multi-billion-dollar conglomerate decide to opt out of providing clear instructions because they knew they would sell more products if the consumer base was ignorant to the fact that they can't use it without killing their children? The scandal was so devastating that it was directly responsible to the World Health Organization's creation of the Code of Marketing Breast Milk Substitutes in 1981. The Harkin-Engel Protocol is an international agreement aimed at ending child labor in the cocoa industry. The cocoa industry has a long reputation of being particularly nasty in terms of labor conditions and human trafficking. It's a massive problem in West African countries, with 60% of the Ivory Coast revenue coming in from cocoa export, most of which are eventually turned into chocolate. The Harkin-Engel Protocol was signed in 2001, when the industry promised to reduce the child labor in Ghana by 70%. The deadline has since been extended 5 times, and as of 2015, The deadline was extended yet again to 2020. In 2015, Nestle admitted that there was some major exploitation going on with their seafood-related products in Southern Asia. Thailand in particular was singled out for forcing laborers to work in slave-like conditions to catch and process fish for Nestle's products. Workers told nightmare stories of how they were physically beaten and had their passports and identification cards removed so they wouldn't be able to leave Nestle's employment after their contract ended. Some are in what's called debt bondage, in which they owed so much money at such a high interest rate that they couldn't ever pay it off. They just had to keep working to stop the debt from growing even bigger. This is all very standard human trafficking behavior. My favorite thing about this section is that the Thailand scandal broke out while Nestle was trying to PR their way out of the continuing to rely on child labor scandal. In order to keep up with the massive amount of global demand for cocoa, Nestle has engaged in equally massive amounts of deforestation. A 2017 investigation found that a large amount of cocoa used in Nestle chocolate products are from national parks or protected reserves in Ivory Coast and Ghana. Now, to be fair, Nestle isn't the only company engaging in this behavior. Companies like PepsiCo and Unilever have also taken advantage of this situation. But just because Stalin killed more people than Hitler doesn't make Hitler any less of a murdering tyrant. I actually did a double take at the sheer arrogance of Nestle when I saw this actual press release from April of this year. I'm not kidding. This is an actual press release that you can find on the actual Nestle website. In the press release, it says that in 2010, Nestle pledged to be engaged in zero deforestation activities by 2020. The press release celebrated the fact that as of April 2019, the entirety of the agricultural supply chain was 77% deforestation free. But think about this 77% statistic for a second. 77% deforestation free means that 23% of all its agricultural commodities is still from deforestation. 23% of the agricultural products from Nestle's $93 billion revenue are from deforestation. And Nestle thinks that's an accomplishment. Ethiopia is a country that faces an unfortunate amount of famine. It's so bad that there are even Wikipedia pages solely on food insecurity in Ethiopia and Ethiopian famines. In 2002, Nestle displayed its immense prowess in situational awareness when they demanded the Ethiopian government repay a $6 million debt in the midst of a particularly bad famine. To Nestle's limited credit, they did retract the demand, but not before more than 8,000 people emailed them complaints about their treatment of the Ethiopian government. In the midst of the PR storm, Nestle agreed to donate $1.5 million to 3 charities in Ethiopia. But it's also hard to feel warm and fuzzies about that move when corporations have an ulterior motive and giant tax breaks whenever they donate to nonprofit organizations. As I mentioned in my video on the water crisis, this topic holds a special place in my heart. I'm from the Mitten State and I've seen firsthand what the company's greed has taken from my neighbors. I'm not going to spend much time on this particular topic since I already covered it a little bit in the water crisis video, but the gist of the situation is pretty simple. Nestle will scout for economically depressed communities and promise them new jobs and improved infrastructure in exchange for bottling rights. They run social media adverts to try to convince the municipality that contracting with the company will be a net gain for the community. If Nestle gains approval to bottle the area's water, they'll pay an absolutely minimal fee. For example, in Michigan, Nestle pays just $200 to bottle 130 million gallons of water. Nestle doesn't just do this in Michigan, California. All across the country, in Pennsylvania, in Oregon, anywhere where there's desperate people and fresh water, Nestle will be there. Which is important because until we reach Nestle's final act of controversy against poor people. I like to emphasize the against poor people part of what I just said, because Nestle has a whole slew of scandals relating to people with financial means that I haven't even covered. From price fixing to bribery to unenvironmental water bottling to literally locking employees in rooms to force them to sign resignation contracts. It's really not that surprising that Nestle is such a toxic company. A documentary in which the former CEO was interviewed revealed just how high up this attitude of entitlement goes. I'm going to give a word-for-word direct translation of his words. There are different opinions on the matter. The one opinion, which I think is extreme, is represented by the NGOs, who bang on about declaring water a public right. That means that as a human being, you should have a right to water. That's an extreme solution. And the other view says that water is a foodstuff, like any other, and like any other foodstuff, it should have a market value. Personally, I believe it's better to give a foodstuff a value so that we are all aware that it has a price. Peter Brabeck later checked his statement in 2013, saying that they were taken out of context. He said he only meant that excessive use of water, like for washing cars, should be privatized, and that basic hygiene in drinking water is a human right. Personally, I don't believe him for a second. He talks about the privatization of water in the same sentence he talks about foodstuff. The logical conclusion from such a statement, water is similar to food and food isn't a human right, is that drinking water shouldn't be a human right. Because, drinking a cup of water is a lot more similar to eating a plate of food than it is to washing a car. I'll upload both the clip from his interview as well as his clarification in a video in the description box. Feel free to form your own conclusion. So what can we do to help stop this? It's so simple. Just stop buying Nestle products. They're a Fortune 500 business, yes, but they're absolutely nothing without our wallets. Without our money, these corporate businessmen in their ivory towers are just normal psychopathic human beings. We hold the cards here. We control whether Nestle continues to thrive off the backs of the downtrodden, or whether they're forced to liquidate and declare bankruptcy. We can put an end to Nestle by spreading this information and boycotting their products.